of economic situation during the times of war with the topic that is the most interesting in this month. And in November, based on good Ukrainian tradition, when we finish harvesting, big part of Ukrainian society in peaceful times should start celebrating actually good, successful harvest and start resting a little bit before in new season. Unfortunately, this year, this beautiful Ukrainian tradition is impossible during the times of war, but about harvest and about how agriculture as important factor of Ukrainian economy worked in this difficult military year, we will discuss during our special presentation that will be done by our colleague Nataliya. But now I would like to give the floor to our partner Robert Kirtman, who is the deputy head of German economic team. Robert, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Glib. Also from my side, a good afternoon or good evening, and a welcome to all participants of our today's online discussion, Economic Review in November, which is already the 8th issue of the monthly that we have been presenting and preparing together. And it is, as always, a great pleasure for me and also for the German economic team, whose deputy team leader I am, to continue our long-standing cooperation with the Center for Economic Strategy in Kyiv in supporting and in co-hosting this event today together. As many of our listeners know by now, the German economic team is a long-standing economic policy advisory project funded by the German government. We have been in Ukraine active for many, many years, but we are also in 6 other countries in the Eastern Partnership region, in the Balkans and in Central Asia active. So we have a kind of broad regional outreach. As Glib already said, I'm very eager to listen on the current situation and the key trends in the different sectors of the economy, as we do usually in this monthly. But today's highlight topic, focus topic, agriculture sector is something I think which is of particular importance, not just because of the importance of the sector for Ukraine, for Ukraine's economy, which is huge, but also for the global implications, because this sector has also global economic implications in terms of providing food security. That's why this is very much also on the global agenda of policymakers. So having said that, I'm very much looking forward to the presentation, but also to the panel discussion later on between distinguished Ukrainian experts and policymakers. From my side, thank you very much for listening. I will now give the word back to Glib for moderating the discussion. Thank you very much.
So right now we are moving to standard part of our monthly discussion. That's basically review of economic situation in November. And I'm giving the floor to my colleague, senior economist of the CES, Dmytro Goryunov. Dmytro, please, the floor is yours. Yes, we can hear you everything as well. Do you see my screen? Yes, so about army, we will discuss news a little bit later. We'll start from not so good news. The war is going on. We are very grateful to our predecessors in the office who installed very powerful generator, but still I understand that in different regions the situation is very different. Sometimes it's just impossible to work in some areas. So we are very grateful that we have generator here because it might be different. So we'll start from the news from the front. As Ukrainian probably viewers know, we managed to free Kherson and whole right bank, all right bank Ukraine. I just am telling about that because we are having foreigners listening to us. So that's why presentation is in English for them to perceive information visually easier. That's why presentation is in English. Unfortunately, behind those nice events and pictures with watermelons, probably not everybody knows that it was extremely difficult to do this, to free Kherson. We have lots of human losses and lots of damages in infrastructure, lots of resources. So the Russians destroyed everything before they were before they left the location, the territory. But now the train is already coming to that area, and lots of postal offices are coming, financial infrastructure, even though the energy system is very ruined, and even neighboring regions also depend on it very much. But one of my colleagues from Lviv, who is now in Lviv, mentioned that he's returning to Mykolaiv, actually. He considers it the safe decision. So we still have hits on energy infrastructure. It has been calculated that it's more than 300 missiles and drones launched, and on the 15th of November we have the biggest hit, more than almost 100 missiles and drones. Fortunately, most of them were hit by our air defense forces, and we are very grateful for that, but still some parts of missiles do manage to reach their targets, and that's why we have damages. During that week we had the biggest emergency power outages in the whole regions of Ukraine. So the situation is pretty difficult, and without new strong hits, probably we will not have complete blackout that Russians probably would like to strive for to achieve. But nevertheless, it's pretty difficult to work and live in such conditions because it's getting colder and we are going to need more energy. So it's all connected. But saying that, business and citizens demonstrate magic, and energy suppliers work wherever it's possible and whenever it's possible. They make more prognosed forecast on power outages for people to be ready to predict their life and plan something. The people buy generators, power banks, flashlights. Also in September and October, we have 10 times more people, 10 times more volume if to say about buying power banks, flashlights, solar panels, 4 times bigger volume of sold flashlights. People understand the situation is very difficult, and you shouldn't just wait that somebody else will do this for them. So they now know that they need to rely on themselves. So in long-standing prospects, it's more reliable. Our foreign partners also help us. They provide us different materials for repairment, and also they provide us with, and at the same time, government also now lifted lifted VAT on some certain products like generators. Nevertheless, it already influenced some indexes. So in July, National Bank first started having that survey and publicating index of it was publishing the index of expectations. So we see that these months we had more decrease, bigger decrease than it used to be, and we have to review those factors based on the results of the 22. If to talk about agriculture, my colleagues will be talking more about this, but we have we actually now renewed the grain deal. It's not maybe as we wanted it to have, not for a longer period, but still 120 days without extending to new ports. But still it's better than without grain deal at all. So that's why we still are ready to continue export, and we can maybe manage to have the same the same indexes, the same numbers that we had previous year, and now so I'm not going to take breath in the literal word from my colleagues, so they will talk about this. Balance of payments after August, when we had a positive balance, very huge. We have again deficit, but not very sustainable. And actually, despite from the fact that our import is a little bit less now. It's mostly connected with finances, and it was not as we forecast, but again, we will talk about it a little bit later. But National Bank sold actually currency and even renewed some of services. Concerning help, support, previous presentation last month, we expected to have record inflows, but maybe because of some bureaucracy processes, it's a little bit slower now. So yes, the inflow is bigger than previous months, but not significantly. But we still have time till the end of the year, because it's still $20 billion that have to be received till the end of the year, and we have a little bit less than 1 month till the end of the year, actually. So generally, actually, of course, everybody understands that in the nearest months we'll have to receive it. Thank you for attention. Thank you, Dmytro. You can stop sharing your screen. Thank you. So now I would like to give the floor to Nataliya Shpygotska. Nataliya is a senior economist, specialist of investigating company Dragon Capital on the daily basis. She's dealing with the situation with Ukrainian agricultural sector and companies. So Nataliya, what's the situation with the harvest? So the reason why we focused, not only because of the season that we focused on this topic, but also we have pretty pessimistic posts in social networks from representatives of different agro holdings concerning also current harvest and concerning expectations of our harvest for the next year. Can you please make a review of what's going on? And then after that, with your colleagues, with experts in agricultural sector, all members of our panels are already here. We will be able to discuss it in detail. So Nataliya, please. Thank you very much for invitation. Do you see my presentation? Yes, everything is perfect. Thanks a lot. So generally, I would like to describe the situation to you. We will and the details will be discussed together with my colleague. That's, as you mentioned, in this period, we are trying to sum up harvesting for the year, but this year is very unusual in all aspects. So how the situation is as of now. For the middle of November, if to talk about generally about areas that we wanted to harvest, we have already harvested 80% of such areas. If to talk about wheat and barley, we almost finished oil seeds, it's sunflower and rapeseed, but we have somehow half percent of areas that has corn still on the fields. If to talk about the situation for November, then the general rate for for grains is 50% less year to year, and we have a range of factors that is influencing this dynamics. We understand first of all that we have less areas for harvesting for spring crops because of the occupation of some territories. Also, we did not manage to gather around 25-30% of winter crops that we actually seed last autumn. So we will have 30% decrease year to year. We remember that previous year we had record harvesting, and because of good yields, because we had very good weather conditions, and we expected less in harvest, less decrease in yield this year, mostly because of some natural reasons, natural factors, normalization of weather conditions. But we also saw that actually harvest this year, crop this year was very difficult because of military actions, because of broken supply chains. And as of now, we see that in generally harvest is 16% less in current condition. That actually looks pretty okay, taking everything into account. So if we actually sum up the fact that we have less areas of harvesting and yield, we expected the dynamics to be a little bit better than minus 50% that we are currently having. But weather conditions are also not very favorable this year for farmers. We have seen humidity, and it's for example for corn it's pretty high. Humidity sometimes can be 40%, and it makes that's why the gathering of later crops should be postponed. So farmers wait for the grain to lose humidity a little bit because of dry weather, not to dry it later with gas, which is extremely expensive now. And still there are some misunderstandings whether 100% of corn will be gathered this year, harvested, because it's also about high value, high expenses, high cost of drying corn. That's why it might actually stay for winter till spring next year. So generally, if we presume that even 100% of corn will be harvested this year, then probably our all harvest of corn and oil seeds will be approximately 35-40% less year to year, approximately 70 million tons. If to talk about the next year, then we still have lots of factors which are not clear. We know that winter crops is almost finished. As Dmytro has mentioned, areas for wheat till the next year will be probably 15% less year to year, taking into account also the decrease in the 20-25% we saw this year, and the issue still remains concerning spring crops for next year. So to get yield for at least in the level of 2022, the reduce of area for wheat should be compensated by spring crops. And the big question is whether farmers are going to have a wish and financial possibility to compensate such decrease by other crops. And the question is which crops. And the main issue is export. As we can see, after the beginning of the war and complete blocking of seaports, export of grain and oil seed crops decreased. It was around 300,000 tons in March, and it led to decrease in internal prices for grain. because we still had remains from our previous harvest, and it was limited consumption. Previous year was the production of grain was 86 million of tons, and we consume only 20 out of it. So everything else was that we didn't manage to export was pressuring internal prices. After signing grain deal in Istanbul in July, we saw that starting from August, Ukrainian seaports started working, and volumes of oilseeds and grains started to be renewed. And as Dmytro has mentioned, in October we managed to export 5.7 oilseed and grain seeds. That is only 3% less than the probably previous year number. So it creates certain conditions for us to be able to actually transport that surplus that we have in internal market, and it will give us the possibility to regulate internal prices for grain and make growth of such crops profitable, and it will probably help with the renewal of areas for harvesting for the next year. But concern this uncertainty about grain deal in November limited this renewal of prices. We saw that prices for wheat and for corn renewed starting from spring for 10-15% approximately, but they are still 50% less than they were previous year, and it was a stable continuation of export of grain till the next harvest campaign, and the precondition for farmers to be able to reload surplus of grain and transport them to liquidity that they can use for investments to the next harvesting campaign, and to have reasonable expectation that harvest of 2023 will be exported in a proper way. We saw previous week that a grain deal was automatically prolonged for 120 days. Current day will run out of the 19th of March 2023. So at that exact time when farmers should actually already start their spring harvesting, and they should understand what and in which amounts they should actually plant. We hope that this expanding of prolonging of grain deal will still continue, and till the next spring campaign, farmers will have a better understanding, and they will be confident in their possibilities, and they will accordingly take decisions and make decisions concerning areas of harvesting for the next year. From my side, that's all I wanted to say. I think we can continue the discussion with our guests. Thank you, Nataliya. I would like to pay your attention that you can ask questions to participants of discussion in Q&A section in Zoom. Nataliya, it's a question to you here actually, while our other participants of discussion will be answering. You can answer right there in the comments. You can stop sharing your screen. And now I would like to tell you who are our members. The first of discussion, Taras Vysotskyi, the first deputy head of Ministry of Agrarian Policy and Food in Ukraine. Then we have in our discussion Alex Lissitsa, the General Director of Industrial Milk Company, if I'm not mistaken, position that actually a post of Alex in Facebook was this impetus to start this discussion. And our colleague Pavlo Martyshev, dealing with land use from Kyiv School of Economy. So from three positions, from position of the country, position of business, position of those researchers that are dealing with the analysis of the sector, we are going to look at the situation. Taras, I see that you're working in darkness. Yes, hello. it looks like not only private sector is limited in think right now. Everybody is equal in Ukraine. In ministry, we also have outages, power outages according to the schedule. I thought that ministries are critical infrastructure, but I see not all as well. Unfortunately, or actually, fortunately, to talk about equality, maybe you're right. So, first of all, I wanted to ask how your picture is. The same as this I almost ideal picture painted by Nataliya, because traditionally ministry is pretty authoritarian, pretty authoritative source of information, reliable source of information of what's happening in Ukraine. And if to talk about the set of risks mentioned also by Dmitro and Nataliya, what kind of policy, what is going to be in our country to prevent failure in harvest next year, and a stable financial state of our players in financial sector to have so that sector can support the economy of Ukraine as much as possible during the war. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for possibility to join your discussion. So in the framework of our today's event, with numbers, I understand and we agree with everything. Actually, I would like to add several summing ups. War is in all sectors, in agrarian sector as well. So you need to understand that in agrarian sector, since we have planting, this is more marketing year, and we understand that it is lasting. You have to talk about base products, 30th of July. Sometimes for somebody, the last day is 30th of September. But why do we have such dates from March till June? We unfortunately already have full-fledged war, but it was the end of previous marketing year, and it finished not completely as we wanted it to finish, but if to take into account that marketing year, it's actually not so bad if to talk about general numbers. So if we did not have the surplus that was being sold in January, in February, we had lots of product. We got payment in advance. The agrarians got their money, so sector got this money, and they managed to fix appropriate resources. And they were even delivered in majority of cases. So it was not such a drastic hit, such an abrupt hit. The most objectively difficult marketing year has actually started now. It started in autumn, we can say from July. So actually it will be a very complex, because this basis that is in the foundation, we see that winter crops, we had less planted winter crops than even was expected. The weather factor is also negative, unfortunately, was here. It was a little bit less in harvest than it could have been, and we always compare controlled territories, because it's understandable that it's less if to talk about the whole Ukraine, but it's even less than on the territories that were not mined anymore, and we could actually started harvesting. So if to take into account wheat, the main culture, 5 million hectares, was on controlled territories previous year. This year it's 3,700, so it's minus 25% territory to territory. And if to compare with the temporarily occupied territories, then it's even 45% decrease, 45. So this decrease of the fundamental foundation for potential results for the next year. The only crop is always stable. It's actually winter rapeseed. As all oilseeds, it shows the regular positive rentability. If you talk about corn seeds, then it's of course less. And we have enough if to take into account security. But this only because of the fact that our consumption is 25%. So even with the decrease, 45%, so it is at 45. We understand that for internal market that is comparatively small, if you talk about the scales of production, it's enough. And I'm sure that in spring it will be enough as well. So we are talking about economic stability of agrarian sector in full and participation of international companies in general. So not to get back to this, no positions, physical, it's what is physically accessible because we have pretty big volume of production. So we have decrease here. The second and the problem here lies in the fact that we are sure in our success if to talk about armed forces, but the spring window is always very short. So even if we have all preconditions, all safety conditions to compensate, to make up for that area is almost impossible. So that's why the second factor is that Nataliya has mentioned that unfortunately this year, as of now, we have the least amount of harvested maize, corn, and we have only 50% gathered. And we understand, of course, that harvesting will continue. It's not the first practice to do this in winter based on weather forecast. It can be less or more losses, but the main actually challenge here not only to harvest it but also to plant it in spring, because it will be just physically not, or maybe not possible to prepare those areas for planting. And we need to understand what agrarian year will look like, and it will be a critical factor. 80%, if always it was around 40% autumn, 60% spring, then next year this marketing year the spring will be 75%, because all those things put together. Now everything depends on what is going to be in spring, and in spring to have everything succeed in success, we need several base factors. I will say what the state is doing to help. The first factor is stable logistics, because to have this basis we need to actually sell it, to have some kind of money. We need stability, because the stability also decreases expenses and increases price for farmers. We now have positive results for this 120 days for the same conditions for grain deal, but the work is continuing. We are not just waiting for the next 4 months. The work is continuing to have even better conditions to talk about amount of seaports and the amount of products, because the earlier we are able to send the signal, the higher will be the price, and the state is continue working for this grain become more comfortable and profitable, not in 120 days, but tomorrow or in a week, because it will be the possibility to sell for proper price that will give us the possibility to cover challenges. This is the first logistic factor and the first element. The second, you probably have heard, it has been announced, the president has announced support of the EU grant for 1 billion euro for solidarity lines. Once again, alternate logistics, the building trains and other things. All those factors, of course, will make logistics cheaper. Alternate logistics, if to talk about, also there are no safety risks. The lower price for logistics, so higher price and we will be able to have such price that will be able to plant again in spring. There are two moments. The first one is to have resource, and the second thing is to understand economy. In spring, we need to decide to plant and not to do something else. So this huge block of logistics from two elements of logistics and improving of grain corridor. The second factor is accessibility of financing. The selling is not just financing as such. We had two waves by government prolonged credits for agrarian producers. They were for 0% for hryvnia, then it will be 5% in hryvnia. It's pretty affordable. So there is an understanding, and it has been announced that 579 will continue its working in the next year. We have money allocated for this in the budget. So for this factor to also be available for those who will not be able during this period to sell products, and they will need financial resources, they can use it. So in fact, those other factors that also to help, it's this deregulation conducted by parliament and in government to talk about accessibility of resources. For example, last week we have one of the regulations adopted. There is no need, if farmer wants to use seeds and it's recognized in Europe, yes, it's possible. So the same now we have easier condition on pesticides now. Even in the first reading, we had the law on GMO adopted. It's a difficult discussion, but still the essence of all these messages is that we had maximum accessibility. We will not have, we'll have not enough time, limited resource. That's why we should have maximum supply. So they need to take all kind of grains that they find and they consider proper. The bigger supply will make it more accessible in price, and it will open Ukraine also for all possible sales. So technologies should be accessible, there should be funds for this, and logistics should let, even with this challenge, to deal with all of this. We still can prepare, of course, not as we do this during our peaceful times, but at least this year, and after that we can continue. They can continue. So it's three main blocks we are dealing with, and seeing the real situation, seeing that we will have lots of challenges, lots of difficulties, but we are sure that this year also is humanitarian. This year to maintain the situation of agrarian sector, we need to do all of this for it to support our economy. Thank you, Taras. Now we will hear what members of the markets are talking, whether it's enough to have all this help from the state, whether it's enough in such complicated situations, weather conditions and all other factors. In addition, Alex, there is a question to you from Q&A, a pretty interesting one and important. Just to move from this picture, harvesting of one crops, whether such players as your company plan to move from commodities to actually investing and to production of food products, to export products with bigger added value. This is also the question that arises with me not only during the last year but in previous years as the Ukrainian businesses, majority of them are pretty strong and pretty profitable. Why they are not active in this radical integration, please, Alex? Good evening. Welcome, everybody. Let's start from harvest. Actually, I would not like to be that evil magician that turns turns everything into pumpkin. But you know, we in Ukraine are used still from the Soviet Union. We are talking a lot about some kind of natural numbers and so on and so forth, sectors. But we need to talk more about financial, economic numbers. So, with the question why we had such small amount of wheat. It's not only because of weather conditions, but also of profitability of these crops. If we look at it, then the average harvesting, I absolutely agree with the colleagues. Last year we had harvest of wheat with good weather conditions and so on and so forth. This year, accordingly, we had a complete price with is 186 USA dollars. In Odessa's $170 is price for non-food and the little bit for food. So you can imagine that 90% of Ukrainian farmers the harvest were not profitable. So only some farmers from Western Ukraine or Northern Ukraine managed to achieve this. So obviously wheat was not and is not profitable. So nobody wanted to plant it at the beginning. But to all of this, let's look at corn and maize. So the same story. We will harvested for a very long time. I absolutely agree with my colleague that we will not be able to do this till spring, and it's good that we at least have what we have. So that's why, if to look at numbers on corn, they are also $210 per ton, but we are still sending we're still selling this, so corn will still it's $210 price. It's if to talk about prices, then they do not cover expenses, because only for draining of this we will spend lots of money, taking into account problems with gas and prices on gas and problems with electricity. To all of this, we are now adding urgent purchase of generators that we do not have in Ukraine, 500 kilowatts plus. One generator is $150,000, and they have you have to wait for them for 2-3 months. So there is a huge scale of problems. You also asked about state support. Nobody expects some kind of state support. Neither small nor big enterprises, large enterprises. So we all understand that there is a war going on. So nobody should wait for some kind of intervention from the state. And it's 25% is given to state directly or any other way. We all know that export rate hryvnia to dollar is 36. So we sell our seeds for 36 hryvnias, but we buy everything according to the exchange rate 41, 42. So this 12% difference is this export contribution to economy of Ukraine. To all of this, we add also that value-added tax is not returned, so purchase prices are automatically minus 14%. So 25-26% agro sector loses just an empty place, and it brings to the fact that sector A is not profitable in some areas. Some, for example, rapeseed, sunflower is almost zero, and everything else is a minus. So for the next year, we will try to understand how we need to plant. Bank financing is almost non-existent. We have no new credits. We are talking about prolongation of old credits, and And to all of this scale of catastrophe, that we have now another question. It's basically absence of financing that Ukrainian agrarians had through some plant protectors, providers, and so on and so forth. So 30% before it used to be paid in spring, 70%, sorry, in spring. Now this topic is all in autumn. Now this topic is almost non-existent. So of course that there are not such colorful prospects for spring. Not so many farmers will be able to deal with it in spring. For example, Kharkiv region, Sumy, Chernihiv, Zhytomyr region, Vysotskyi this year absolutely burned. So that's why the hope for the fact that in spring we will have at least 50% of areas covered, that's already good. If we cover at least 50% of that area that we are now working with, that will be the perfect result. Let's hope that we'll do this. And now, if to talk about commodities with added value, it's one of my favorite questions. I get it every time. It's somewhere in the line after my favorite questions about Academy of Agrarian Sciences, Academy of Agrarian Science and Studies. Why in this line? Because they are actually interconnected. Why do we have so little products with value, added value, or why don't we produce some products, some food products? Let's start with the fact who needs them. What kind of products are we going to work? So some people say, let's produce yogurts. Okay, where are we going to export this? Let's produce flour. Okay, where are we going to sell it? Let's produce sausages. Even better topic. Where will we go with the sausages? Who will we sell it to? So markets, financing, to get into any kind of program process on transmission of project financing starting from 2014. We have probably non-existing banking financing. So we need to get money somewhere from abroad, because if to talk about Ukrainian risks, nobody is going to allocate money, especially in some long-term projects, because this changing, it's around 5-7 years. Third block, why it's about science and technologies, because we do have a problem with science and technologies. We do not have anything to have some kind of innovation in to talk about processing. So we need to buy it with somebody. We need to move together. And the market, we need some kind of amino acids, some kind of starches, some product for feeding animals. And the fourth block, it's a typical Ukrainian corruption. If you now just want to build something in Ukraine in green field, you'll just spend at least 2 years and at least $2 million to actually turn this field into a building site. And after that, you have absolutely no desire to deal with processing. I think that I have answered your question. Yes, thank you. Only one clarification. You're talking about bank financing, not project financing, but current financing. As far as I understand, largely this worsening of financial condition of agro producers this year is connected with weather conditions, not optimal weather conditions. But why do you expect that banks won't be able to help in spring those who actually have the possibility to plant more, waiting for, let's say, average weather conditions during the next harvest? And I hope that, and why do you have such opinion? Everything is very simple. All kind of banks should take somebody as a commodity, as a collateral. So if wheat considered to be a collateral before, now this grain that is somewhere in Kharkiv region in warehouses, absolutely not interesting for banks as collateral. Even more, they will not take elevator from Kharkiv or Sumy region as collateral. Everybody can understand risks. So state banks is one story, and international banks that's different story. International banks look at all the situation and they can estimate risks that we are currently having, and to talk about the situation that it will somebody can go to the bank and take money as with collateral, with wheat as collateral, is impossible. Pavlo, what is your picture? How much does it coincide or does not maybe coincide with picture of our colleagues? And how do you see possible steps in state policy in reaction from the side of business to what's going on right now? Yes, Gleb, thank you for the invitation. I actually agree with my colleagues concerning problems with future harvesting, concerning possible structure of future harvest. Generally, what is expected by the market expects to have significant decrease of areas for corn, also because of the deficit of fertilizers, and it's pretty capital. It's a seeds that needs lots of capitals invested. We will have more area for oil seeds. We see potential now. Actually, sunflower in elevator in the middle of the country is 350. Country non-raffinated oil 1,300. So we have 1 to 4, but generally it's 1 to 2. Oil is reevaluated concerning sunflower. Logistics is of course important, but crush margin of processing factories is pretty high, and generally market expect that sunflower will get more expensive. So it means that it will actually become more profitable. Nevertheless, Ukrainian Grain Association estimates the areas for 4.5 million of tons, and even though before we had maximum 7 million. So even despite the fact that we have huge potential on increasing profitability of sunflower, the areas will be limited. So we will still have a decrease of area by corn. We will have a bigger part of oil seeds, 40-50% in our opinion, and maybe we will have also spring barley or spring wheat. Maybe colleague has different opinion, but it seems to me that it's because of the fact that agrarians would like to have more short-term, let's say, money, because spring crop, spring wheat is harvested earlier than sunflower or corn. And one more factor why we will have not so much corn, that because the forward programs are not working that well because of the problem with grain corridors. So the situation can be changed by the if grain deal is expanded, if Mykolaiv seaport starts working, it will mean that prices for grains will get higher, and generally expanding of prolonging of grain deal will actually push agrarians from oil seeds to grain seeds. Since export is limited, then the priority is given to oil seeds. Concerning generally prices, several words about world market in oil and oil cultures looks pretty balance is pretty difficult, because we have huge productions of soy in Southern America, not production of palm oil, but not a huge demand from China. And we at the same time see that prices for wheat also increased, but on Euronext they are actually renewing again, making risks higher for wheat. It's deficit of humidity in the States, it's drought in Argentina, that's heavy rains in Australia that destroy crops, harvest of Australian wheat. So maybe we will actually see some surprises in this sphere closer to spring, but at the same time, we see that in principle, oil culture and oils on world market is enough, but we do not expect any kind of recession in 2023, and consumption will be not high. So we see so far, I can sum up that priority of the spring is given to oil seeds, but the situation might change if there is some drastic change in price of prices, and if they open Mykolaiv seaport. Thank you, Pavlo. I have question to Taras, if you don't mind, and then maybe participants of discussion will have some comments on the speeches of their colleagues. Taras, the question is the following. Lots of things in the situation are not under our control. We cannot predict, we cannot control behavior of the aggressor. We do not control weather at all, as we actually have never controlled it. But the question of financing of the sector looks like something we can do something with. Of course, I'm not talking about some very aggressive participation of the state, because of course this year it's impossible. But this pretty pessimistic picture painted by Alex concerning financing of spring works, field works, next year in particular, how, in your opinion, objective is this opinion, whether the state will be able to cover everything that we talk about, insurance of risks that your colleagues from Ministry of Economy are now talking about, because risks here are less substantial than in, for example, building of some kind of project for many years. We have here short-term risks. So will country be able to suggest something for not to stay in the situation that we will not be able to plant because we had difficult year and there is no money, no financial resources, and as a result sector can, after such a beautiful pre-war spiral when it was developing every year, when it was going high, now it can start spiraling down. Thank you for your question. Concerning financing, dear colleagues, we are talking about operational financing. I would like to indicate once again that in 2 weeks, that after 2 weeks after the beginning of the war, it was announced and it was launched several category of credits for agrarian sectors. They couldn't cover all countries because it was limited, but majority of average businesses, middle businesses managed to use it. So talking with banks, we see that the resource for such thing just to prolong existing situation we have, and for compensating interest rate also. In fact, companies very actively will make decisions. Now we are talking about fertilizers and some other factors, final factors, starting from, let's say, second part of January, and important factors that we discussed before. So, of course, jointly with the sector, we will be talking about financing of spring field works, but to understand the scale, It was 90 million of revenues before. Now it can be maybe even 250 million. And another thing is what areas are ready for this, how much, for example, corn will be harvested till that time, because there will be some factors it will be just not impossible to do this. So we will not be able to say that if a condition is certain amount of billion of dollars, then everything will plant. No, and we will need to take into account how at that moment, because of the grain deal will be financed. So now to give some kind of objective models, and 5, 7, 9 in agro direction will start working in these or that coordinates, it's still impossible. But to start saying that it will continue working, then yes, we can already understand that. I see that we have the need of planning here, but also it's impossible to plan for futures. So we ask all the resources that can be used, so can be sold, for example, for free. Then yes, it has to be done beforehand, and then it will be we will need to have the possibility to give it actually, and also. This financial guarantee, majority will be used, and we understand everything that changes of economy should be taken into account. So I would like to say that unfortunately, as of now, to say that we will have 1, 2, 3, it's impossible. But all those factors are taken into account, and we will need to say that we are waiting for spring campaign, and what do we need for the sector? The state will do this. That's the current situation. Thank you, Taras. Now I have the question to you, Nataliya. The benefit of the dragon is that you are analyzing financial factors of the companies and numbers, especially how it looks on international platforms. How do you estimate it? Because always participants of the market say that everything is bad, they need more support, and then the state says, no, everything is okay. So how do you see the objective picture on financing numbers in the sector? How black and white it is, maybe gray? Thank you for the question, Gleb. The question is, of course, it can be divided into P&L and balance. So if to talk about balance, about the same working capital, then it's obvious. Then it's a limitation of liquidity in yields from previous year, and big part it can be also given through forward programs, and it gives some part of liquidity, so less money needed to be invested into components, and we needed more money for equipment, for paying of the general numbers. So we still have here some kind of less for production of grain, and now we have more advanced payments that agrarian producers did not have before, and also we can say that much more has to be invested in operational cycle just to support this operational activity. Maybe it's a little bit early now to talk about P&L of this season, because we see that it is significantly less year to year. we in 2021 we had record yield and pretty high prices. Then it could have actually be less than $1,000 from hectare, even though the stable the stable picture was $200-300 from hectare. What we see for the several months of this year, the profitability of agrarian sector is around $200-300 per hectare. So I can see that it's similar to previous year, but season is not yet done. Companies are still doing are still harvesting, and actually will estimate the price. So we will see also prices for the prices for corn, but P&L will be much less than it was in comparison to the previous year. Thank you, Nataliya. You actually made me happy, even as though those numbers do not look so terrible if to talk about previous year. And you have mentioned then we had some kind of strengths to us. But would you like to comment maybe something here? Or maybe you have some additional thoughts about some document that can be used. So would maybe you would like to comment to what was said by other stakeholders? Yes, I would like to say that we do not expect any particular preferences. I'm talking more about not to give us money, but more about more creative decisions concerning what was going on with the logistics and also insurance of risks, and that was discussed, especially in the sector. Well, the problem we have the economy that is under the war now. So everything that is happening in the country now is connected with forwards one year before. So now it's in the best case scenario 2-3 weeks, because we don't know how it's going to look like. So to talk about this company, we can plan it more or less, but we will not be able to plant anything whenever we start. But I would like to comment several words about sunflower, why we will have not as much of it. That's what we are talking about between each other on the market. So the that we have sunflower of this year, we have lots of it, and we have such disease now for our sunflowers, because they are to plant sunflower on sunflower, it can bring lots of problems. And also a colleague was talking about margin of changes in sunflower. Yes, I understand that it used to be less, but it was connected to the fact that we also were sending short for good money. This year we did not have where to actually put it, and only the last year they started actually planning this. So now I think this the sunflower seed that has not been sold, we will just send more feed for Western countries for animals. Concerning financing, I agree with Nataliya that it's a little bit early to talk about this, but together with our colleague in the parliament and with the government, we have lots of issues now with returning cash and so on and so forth. it's connected to the fact that farmers already now want to accumulate some money because they don't plan even to plant. We have to take it into account. We will look at it, but what can the state do actually? That's what we are doing together with Ministry of Agrarian Policy. We have to actually give the possibility actually to solve the issue of covering of covering this through big international banks like EBRD, for example. I do not see even bigger banks currently, but we have been under negotiations with them, but they do have also risks. So if to find together with government some risk that can be covered through some kind of dollars, we will get the same IFC, and we will be able to give several billions of dollars for financing if we will be able to eliminate those risks. So to finish our talk in a more optimistic note, together with the Ministry of Agrarian Policy, we have been working on, and with profile ministers, we will be working on the mechanisms how our Western partners will be able to cover those risks for international and financial institutions like EBRD or World Bank can finance agrarian sector for the next year. Okay, thank you. And probably the last question from me to finish on a positive note. The discussion, yes, that was the first offline meeting in Kyiv. From the beginning of the war, we had several famous in Ukraine, and they started discussing how they are investing money, and two of them invested actually for their own for animal actually for farming on their own areas, lands. So I do not want to talk now here about the problems that exist in this animal sphere, but in this difficult situation that we are currently seeing, do we have prospects in increasing this or it's a weak sector? So or maybe it is actually a very weak factor, and we don't want to invest in there. Well, animal business differs between one from the others. There are problems with of course it depends on the situation. We have to talk about pigs because fat now is increased in prices, and from the beginning of war, everybody was afraid to deal with pigs. But now we see that now, yes, people start actually having pigs in homesteads, and we around Easter we will have lots of fat heat in the sphere of animal husbandry. If to talk about some other problems, if to talk about dealing with birds, poultry, there is no problem there. There is export to Europe and to lots of other countries. Everything is more or less stable. The more difficult situation is for beef and dairy products, but it's pretty long project, and this investment to some areas we observe that it's just they just try to have this amount of cattle to be able to go through winter. But I think that during the war we shouldn't expect some kind of huge investments to animal husbandry, because lots of money needed for this. So you actually just proved what was said by one of the Ukrainian academists, that broilers chicken is what is needed, yes, to have everything, because in the sector everything is more or less okay. Nataliya, Taras, would you like to comment concerning animal husbandry, or maybe there is something that can already change and help a little bit Ukrainian economy? I can say several words, and then I will give the floor to Taras. From my point of view, from the one side, we could have expected pretty huge splash because the decrease to grain seeds on internal market will mean the decrease of prices for feeds. But we saw that there were some changes in products in animal husbandry, as everybody was talking about this case of eggs. For Easter it was less than 1 hryvnia. Now we see that it's around 8 hryvnias. So even in such condition, there can be changes in fluctuations in prices that actually can change the question of profitability. I was also looking with interest selling of farms, and I have seen that lots of pig farms actually was for selling, and even based on the fact of expertise and feeds, this is actually pretty important. Thank you, Taras. Yes, here I agree with the colleagues that such changes now can be fluctuations to both positive and negative parts. So price is 40 already 45 hryvnia, but it's around 20%. But also it's about milk products. We have less decrease in prices now in 4 months, but animal husbandry in particular, it's actually long term, so we cannot say that for long-term prospects they can react mostly in poultry area and sometimes maybe pigs, but other directions, depending on other factors, they might get this that might get this or not. So long term they are potentially can be fragmental, where we have actually fast cycle. They will react on this fast changes because we had this splash unexpected. Though, so fortunately, it's impossible to forecast it, to prognose this. But it's through the basis pretty when we have this short circle, then we will have some changes. Long terms, we'll have to wait till the end of the war. Thank you, colleagues. So we will finish our today's discussion. I hope that our all good scenarios will be able to take place next spring. We are waiting for everybody who has been present today. It will be some kind of finalizing, summing up review when we will look at the situation, what we have to wait, what we can wait in 2023. Thank you, everybody. I wish you all calm evening, and actually I wish you actually holiday next month, holiday mood and not a scary one. Thanks a lot.